My man David Harris is at league meetings, right? There's a lot of stuff going on down there. We're going to talk about the tush push, flag football, and even a little bit of Commanders football. Are they being patient or are they rushing? We'll get to all of that in just a second here on today's Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hola, howdy, arrivederci, all of those things, whatever I'm saying, if it says hello and welcome to Locked On NFL, that's exactly what I'm trying to convey. Hello and welcome to Locked On NFL. It is Wednesday. That means we have David Harrison here. He's down in Palm Beach at the league meetings that have just ended. So we got a lot of football to discuss with you. Make sure you tap into Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch or listen. We will be there. And when we're there, we're going to be sponsored today by Game Time. That is right. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, I said I got Dave here, so what we're going to do is, by the way, welcome back, Dave. You were out last week, tending the business. Sir. We appreciate you having you back. We're going to discuss the Commanders. Are they still being patient, or did they get close enough to rush it? The team that they're chasing is obviously Philadelphia, just like everybody else. So we got some tush push stuff to go over with that. Right in the middle, we're going to talk about the Bengals being on the edge, but they also have to be guarded. What do I mean by that? We'll get to that in the middle of the show. We're going to start at the very top, though, talking about Lamar Jackson and his contract extension. But before we get to that, Roger Goodell is actually pondering NFL players playing in flag football. And the reason why we're going to talk about Lamar Jackson, because he's got to be your quarterback if you allow it to happen, right? But how does Baltimore feel about that if they're going to give him $300 million? And I'm going to tell you, it's a disaster waiting to happen if they do this. They will start right there. I can't even believe this is something that Goodell is even considering and thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's so there's two sides of this, right? Like, I get why the overall game of football would be interested in being an Olympic sport. And I understand that obviously if you're talking about something in football, it's going to relate to the NFL and all that stuff. And obviously we've seen the league take all these steps towards becoming a more international product, right? The Washington Commanders just got awarded the United Arab Emirates, location for an international fan base and all that stuff. Like, the team is constantly trying to evolve their overseas footprint. The first game in Spain is going to be played this coming season by hosted by the Miami Dolphins. I'm hoping to be on hand for that with the Washington Commanders visiting Spain to play that game against Miami Dolphins. But whatever it is, the NFL is always looking to do that, right? They had a footprint there in the 80s and 90s with the World League and NFL Europe and all that stuff. Kind of gave that away, but I think it was always kind of on the back burner of like, look, it's not going to go away forever. We just want to figure out a new strategy. Shad Khan, who obviously you are very familiar with covering the Jacksonville Jaguars, has been a big, pusher of that as well, and his connections to London and all that. But, so I get that part of it. The side I don't get would be from a player perspective, to be quite honest with you. It's more to me on the players, and that's what Roger kind of said, like, the association, the NFLPA, the union has got to get involved and everything like that. Football is not a sport that you can play year round. It's just not, right? Like, basketball players, I mean, you remember watching the documentary of Michael Jordan during NBA Jam. He's having ballers come into the set so he can get games in between takes and between shoots, right? Like, basketball, and I would say that basketball is not even, necessarily the game you should play year round, especially as you get older. But like baseball, you could probably play year round. Hockey is one of those sports you probably can't do year round, right? But like, I get the desire to do it, and you see the World Games going on, World Cup in soccer, the other sports that are in the Olympics, and as a kid, like, that's part of the athletic dream, right? Not just wearing your favorite uniform, but also getting a gold medal and representing your country and all that stuff. So I get all that. I think that I would lean on, if flag football were to become an Olympic sport, I think I would be on the side of the conversation that there should be flag football athletes. And I know that there are flag football athletes who would like to tell you that they could do that better than a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson could do it, which right. I don't know if I go that far, but I think just because of the longevity of, because NFL careers are incredibly short, because of how physical they are, even for quarterbacks who, granted you have the Tom Brady's and all that stuff, but there are a lot of quarterbacks who don't have those types of longevity, long types of careers. I just would hate to see a guy like Lamar Jackson go through what like Paul George went through, you know what I mean? And end up with an injury during something like that derails your main career on top of your, gold medal, whatever, aspirations.
And even with Paul George and even more recently, Joel Embiid, I mean, he can't stay healthy but for 40 games. And he spent all summer over there working out with those guys. That's why Kawhi Leonard came home. They sent him home, and now he's available for his team. You can advance the game, man, but you can't step on the real product because you're not actually playing real football. This is like Robert Edwards going to the Pro Bowl on a beach and playing beach volleyball and ruining his career. You know what I mean? And the second that happens, it is going to be a nightmare. But speaking of Lamar Jackson, I know he just signed an extension a couple of years ago, but my man Kevin Ostracker says he's about to re-up. He's about to re-up, man, like an episode of The Wire. Check this out.
Lamar's deal right now, obviously, he signed a couple of years ago, 5 years, $260 million, $135 million of that guaranteed. His cap hit this season is $43.65 million. Next year, that spikes up to $74.65 million. Josh Allen's deal that he got, because that is where everybody is looking and pointing, that's the big deal. He got a 6-year extension with Buffalo worth $330 million. $250 million of that is guaranteed. So that is the new standard. That is the new threshold. And the fact that the Bills got that done before any other quarterback with that threshold means that they have set the standard there. So whenever Lamar signs his deal, he will most definitely surpass that. And John Harbaugh with the glowing endorsement of, when he gets paid, he's going to be the highest paid player in football. John Harbaugh is making that clear about Lamar Jackson.
And Lamar Jackson should be amongst the 2 or 3 highest paid players in football. But we know that whenever it's your chance, you are going to reset the market, even if you're a top 10 player in the league. If you're a top 5 quarterback, you're going to be the guy that resets the market. Dave, that's even the bigger point. Why even risk letting these dudes play a game in the Olympics? And I understand growing the game. The thing about the NFL, it is so big. I know you have to keep being proactive, but I just don't think this is the way you do it.
No, I mean, I think like an NFL sponsored Olympic team, you know what I mean? That's probably the way to go. Because again, I know flag football, you're not tackling, right? But again, soft tissue issues, injuries, ligament injuries, ACLs, you know what I mean? Hamstrings, incidental contact, those things are more debilitating than a lot of the injuries you get outside of concussions, from the physical contact. So yeah, I'm all about, I would love to watch flag football in the Olympics, I think, but I don't want to see NFL players doing it. You know what I mean? As far as the Lamar Jackson thing is concerned, I'll tell you this, man. Like, I'm never going to tell a player or another human being in a position to go, get paid to not go get paid. Like, if you want to go get paid, go get paid.
Yeah.
But here is, and this comes up every time we talk about a quarterback contract. Every quarterback at some point in time talks about chasing Tom Brady. I want to chase Tom Brady. I want to be the next Tom Brady, from a success standpoint, stuff like that. But very few, if any, quarterbacks are doing what Tom Brady did. And listen, Tom Brady hasn't been retired that long. Mm-mm. Lamar Jackson has played 30% of the time that Tom Brady has. However, he has already made, 43% of the career earnings Tom Brady has. Yeah. Lamar Jackson is 13% ahead on career earnings of Tom Brady at the current pace that he's on right now for his career. And again, I understand there's inflation, but let's not pretend Tom Brady retired 10 years ago, right? The market has not been so reset that number should be that skewed for a quarterback who has not won a championship. And that's not just on Lamar. Let's also be clear here, right? Championships, I know wins and losses, not quarterback stats, but they really are. Got it. But it's not just on the quarterback to go win championships. But the thing about these quarterback contracts that I hate is like the emphasis is always on resetting the market. How about helping your team win a championship?
Mhm.
How about go make $300 million in your career and win 5 rings instead of making $400 million in your career and winning no rings? Because at the end of the day, when you go in the Hall of Fame, nobody is going to care what your total career earnings was.
Right.
They're going to care how many championships you won. So for the individual player, the question has to come back to, are you more concerned about making the most money you can? Because let's not get it twisted. Whether you make $400 million in career earnings or $350 million in career earnings,
You live in the
you're
same.
good, bro. You're good, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I understand it's not all that money once you get all the fees and the agents but you're good, bro.
Yeah.
Or are you worried about winning as many championships, understanding everything that comes with that, the endorsement money, the company opportunities, the business opportunities, like a lot of that stuff's already coming for you anyway, but you're going to get even more, you're going to become even more valuable when you got rings behind it, right? When Tom Brady can hold up championship rings in the commercial, that rate goes up. You know what I mean? That contract goes up. So I just would love to see quarterbacks say they want to be Tom Brady and then actually follow the Tom Brady model, because right now most quarterbacks in the NFL are not walking the walk that matches the talk that they're speaking.
Right. And winning championships increases your team valuation a whole lot. And to
Yeah.
piggyback on how important those international games are, if each game is 10%, let's just say if you had a 10-game season and each game was 10% of your revenue, 10 times 10 is 100%. It's a 16-game season when the Jaguars started going to London. Mark Lampin, the president of the team, said that appearance in London amounted to 11% of the revenue for this team, and that's why they were going over there. So it does make business sense. But speaking of teams that are paying a few people a lot of money, the Ravens draft well. The Bengals, they don't. How are they going to finish or get better by paying 3 people all of the money that they've been paying? And we'll discuss that and more here in just a second on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. Listen, imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. And there's a lot of people in this area that will be watching the college basketball tournament this weekend, knowing that their favorite team and the team that they're rooted for their entire life has a chance to do something special. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks is a curation process that makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and even more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On NFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're going to get to a subject that James and I, we have texted each other about for a number of weeks when all of this was going on. And that's when the Bengals were sitting there trying to sign 2 wide receivers to life-changing money and dangling their defensive end out there for the whole world to see. We're going to listen to James Rapine and Jake from Locked On Bengals talk about the things that they haven't done. All right, but they don't mention Trey Hendrickson. We're going to mention Trey Hendrickson, but we'll also talk about why the Bengals are in a bit of a pickle if they continue to do things the same way that they have been doing things over the last, well, I would say 5 years because it's relevant, but some people will tell you it's been the last 50 years. Listen to the guys from Locked On Bengals.
Free agency activity is mostly done because we've heard it from the horse's mouth. You could have read between the lines and come to this conclusion before. That's why I've said, James, on this show in the last couple of weeks, like, I'll believe there's another move when I see it. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about some other moves that would help. But let's start there, James. Haven't talked to you since then. What's your first reaction? What are your thoughts around the Bengals not pending another veteran move here anytime soon?
It was the biggest fear, honestly, that anyone should have at really any point this offseason. Like, this is such an important position for the Bengals because They've been so bad at it. It's been like everyone's focused on the defense, right? Because the defense was really, really bad last year. And I get it. Guard has derailed this team at one point or another for the entire Joe Burrow era, half a decade. It's been a big reason why they've either the season ended, Joe Burrow got hurt, mixture of both, or he's taken too many hits and it's hit. And then eventually it's his right tackle that costs him. Like guard is clearly the biggest weakness on the team. And for the Bengals to continue to go into the draft, like last year, they had multiple needs going into the draft, like major needs, like both tackle spots, right? Right tackle and defensive tackle, just huge focuses. This year, it's going to be guard and everything on defense.
All right, so people think Cincinnati hasn't tried to build up their roster. That's a lie. And the reason why this Trey Hendrickson situation was so bad is because you hit me up one night, and basically I ain't gonna tell people what you said about the Bengals, but it was very, very late at night about when they were trying to, act like they wanted to trade him. Somebody told me, man, the Bengals, they're losing because they're paying all three of those guys money and they can't pay anybody else. That's a lie. Yeah. They haven't paid all three of those guys money and played a game yet. The problem is they went to the Super Bowl when two of those dudes were in their second year and Jamar Chase was in his rookie year. And since then, they haven't drafted well enough to even think about letting a guy like Trey Hendrickson go. And now that they paid all these people, they ain't going to have the money, James. So now they've made it more difficult to do something they should have been doing, and they can't do it when they had the bread. How are they going to do it without it?
Right. What you've now done is you've turned your deficiency into your single point of failure, right? Like it's one thing to have a deficiency and try to figure out a way to win around it. If you can't win around your deficiency, you now have no choice but to fix it. The problem is Cincinnati Bengals have had years to fix this problem. And I don't know what the problem is. The problem is either in the scouting department, it's in the information collection department, it's in the information evaluation department, or it's in the decision-making process, which is headed up by your general manager, right? There's a flaw or several flaws in there somewhere. Because the Cincinnati Bengals, like you said, it's not like they're trading away all their draft picks and they're just not drafting dudes. Like they had 4 top 100 picks last year, 3 top 100 picks the year before that, the year before that, and the year before that. Like the year before that, like they're having top 100 picks just like every other NFL team in the 4 last year. Like the 4 top 100 picks last year. If you look at Cincinnati Bengals, if we rewind to March of last year, and I'm covering the Bengals, and you got T. Higgins, you got Jamar Chase, you got Joe Burrow, and you Alex Kappa, hopefully he's going to take a step forward, which he didn't, and now he's no longer a Bengal. Trey Hendrickson is growing as a Bengal who came over from the New Orleans Saints. I'm looking at top 4 top 100 picks. I'm like, bro, like this is the year. Go get it done. They addressed the O-line in the first round. They addressed the D-line in the second round. They go get a wide receiver at pick number 80 who has 4 catches all year. Mm-hmm. There's the clear point of your evaluation process. How do you draft a receiver in a top 100 pick number 80, and he has 4 catches all year long? Like, there is a significant flaw in the evaluation process because I don't know if that's a Jermaine Burton problem or if that is a scheme problem or what. But whatever the problem with that led to Jermaine Burton, because he played a whole bunch of games, having only 4 catches. By the way, your 6th round pick from the year before, Andre Yosevach, comes up with 51 catches, which is great. But if you had that, what are you spending the 80th overall pick on this dude who's going to get 4 balls all year, right? Like there is a disconnect.
And Pickens didn't even play a lot of games.
Right. And and part of the problem, I think, for a lot of people, when we watch teams, right? I remember covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and general manager Jason Light, who I think is a very smart drafter. He's a very smart talent evaluator, was not a fit with Dirk Cutter. The head coach, they fired Lovie Smith. They kept Dirk Cutter to lead Jameis Winston to the promised land. Didn't happen. And part of the problem, I remember a lot of Jason Light's draft picks. I was like, this draft pick doesn't seem to fit what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are trying to do. I remember when they drafted Vita Vea. I was like, Vita Vea is a nose tackle. They don't use a nose tackle, right? And Vita Vea, for his first year or so, he was a solid player, but wasn't this great player. Then Todd Bowles comes in, Bruce Arians comes in, new coaching staff. Vita Vea moves to nose tackle. And all of a sudden, all of Jason Licht's draft pick, boom, hit. Why? Because the evaluation, the decision-making on the roster building, and the coaches, they're all lockstep. There is a problem in the Bengals organization that predates all these contracts. I've talked down about these contracts. I've DM'd with James Rapine about these contracts. And I've told James Rapine, I hope I'm wrong, bro. Like, I really do. I hope I'm wrong. Because I like Joe Burrow. I like Jamar Chase, the dog in him. I don't have anything against T. Higgins. I don't have anything against Cincinnati, the Bengals, whatever. So I hope I'm wrong. But the problem that has not gotten the Cincinnati Bengals back to the Super Bowl or over the hump leading up to these contracts, you now have no choice but to fix that problem. You have to draft well. You can't not draft. Like, you're not going to go out there and trade for Laramie Tunsil anymore. You're not going to go trade for Deebo Samuel. You can't go trade for a Trey Hendrickson if another one becomes available, right? You don't have the room to do that anymore. You have to draft well. You don't, like, it's not a want. You got to nail your first round pick, got to be a starter. Your second round pick needs to be a starter. Your third round pick better be a really good rotational player at worst. Fourth round player, rotational player. Fifth round player better have a role in packages and play special teams. Like, this is not a want. You have to now do this if you're the general manager of the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you can't do it continuously, if you continue to not be able to do it, the organization needs to figure out, is it because my GM isn't getting the right groceries for my chef? Or is it because my chef can't cook the recipe that my GM is giving him, but that's the recipe I want? And you got to go figure out which part of that process needs to be replaced, or both parts of that process need to be replaced. That's why I look at like a guy like Cliff Kingsbury and Lance Newmark, Commander's assistant GM, Commander's offensive coordinator. They are growing within the exact same organization right now, doing it in a way that both men have said, I've never really seen it done this way before, but I'm loving every second of it. And I'm loving everything I'm learning in this process. And a second time around head coach, a GM or assistant GM who's been in Detroit, seen that team grow, help grow Washington, bring those two guys together to a new job. Not that I'm wanting to push them out the door. I love those dudes. But bring them in together to a new job, because you're bringing two guys who are coming from the same brain trust that's obviously locked in. Adam Peters and Dan Quinn are one of the most locked in duos in the NFL right now. Mm-hmm. So bring a duo like that. If it's not Cliff and it's not Lance, go around the league and find another duo. This business of let me go find a GM over here, let me go find a head coach over here, and just hope that they marry does not work more times than not.
Does not work. And that's why sometimes when you have success like the Bengals did by going to Arrowhead and winning and actually being an ingrown toenail for the Chiefs that the Chiefs don't want to see every single year, and losing some other games that were really close and even going to the Super Bowl, sometimes it's fool's gold. Having to say that they have to draft well, it's like saying Giannis, who's a great player in the NBA, has to not only occasionally hit a three, he has to lead the league in three-pointers made and three-point percentage. Yeah. It's just like you're asking them to be the best at their weakness, and that's a hard pill to swallow. You mentioned Deebo and you mentioned Laramie Tunsil. We're going to talk about the team you cover and talk about the Eagles, who I was going to compare the size of the three-headed monster that Cincinnati had on the offensive line, who are probably bigger than the three biggest Eagles linemen. So they've tried in Cincinnati to block. But we're going to talk about the Eagles doing this tush push that I ain't got a problem with, and see how close the Commanders are to being able to get over the hump. We'll do that in the third and final segment here on Locked On NFL. All right, before I ask you, James, how close the Commanders are and whether or not them trading for two players who may be right at the peak or maybe on the other side of their prime, I'm going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, because the Philadelphia Eagles, a lot has been made about the tush push. My opinion of it, after I give you that, I'll play the clip and give you your opinion of it, because you and Luvu, you dude up there, I think Luvu might be the one who submitted this request that this thing get out of here. But for me with the Eagles, you might not be able to stop it, but you can do it back. Do it back to them and see if it works. That's why I say it's not unfair. But Lou DiBiase here talks about the Eagles and the league meeting tabling of the tush push as a rule.
All right, this tush push war is going too far. I mean, this is unbelievable. So the NFL did not get the 24 votes needed to ban the push in 2025. Only 16 owners decided against the play. And yet, instead of the rule going through and not having to do this until next year again, the NFL is tabling this until the May meetings. How, because they didn't get the result they wanted, the minority 16 owners, how come they get to table this instead of it being a final decision? I mean, this is unbelievably soft. This play does not impact the NFL enough. It does not cause the harm, the injuries that some of these owners are saying it does. They're jealous. They want an automatic play for one team out of the picture. And I think it's embarrassing how far they're taking this. It really is embarrassing.
All right, Dave, you got a front row seat. Let me know how you feel about this issue.
I mean, look, I think that part of the problem is not that the vote happened and then they didn't get the votes they needed. So the NFL is like, okay, let's do this again, right? Because the NFL also came out and Rich McKay said, historically, the NFL is not in favor of banning something or changing a rule to specifically stop one or two teams from doing something they do really well, right? So like, that's not really the motivation here. Is like the NFL's like, no, guys, we want you to get rid of this, so we're going to do this again. What the problem is that a lot of people came into the conversation of, is this a football play or is this not a football play? That's one part of the conversation. The other part of the conversation is this a player safety issue or is this a competitive issue? Because I think most coaches would tell you, if it's a football play and it's a competitive issue, let it go. That's our job. It's our job to figure it out. If it's a non-football play and it's a safety issue, then it's an easy get rid of it. If it's a non-football play, but it's not a safety issue, it becomes a little bit more on one side. If it's a football play and a non-safety issue, then you pass it, right? So there's multiple avenues here. And what a lot of people requested was more safety data. They want injury rate data. They want all these types of things. Because, look, one of the main proponents of this, Jason Kelsey, I've listened to his podcast with his brother Travis. Jason Kelsey has talked about this is a brutal play. It's a brutal play. It is not easy to do. It is not easy to execute, and it hurts, right? Now, there hasn't been a serious injury and all that stuff. So if you're the NFL, you kind of get to the point, it's like, okay, do we wait for a potential serious injury? I know Chris Jones wasn't happy about the way the Kansas City Chiefs tried to defend it, and I don't blame him. You know what I mean? So it's like, as teams go through this, right, part of the Frankie Louvu thing, it's like, look, like you go airborne like that, you get flipped upside down, like you could hurt yourself. You go airborne like that, you land on somebody else, you could hurt somebody else. That's the reason they don't want you jumping over the center during long snaps and all that stuff, right? So there's a lot. It's not as simple as just, is it a football play? Is it not a football play? No, that's what a lot of us talk about it. But there is a safety element to it that the NFL wants to evaluate. That's the reason that the conversation is being extended. That is the reason that the conversation is being tabled, not because the NFL is trying to pull a fast one and say, no, guys, you were supposed to vote this down, so we're going to do it again and hope that you do that again. Plus, let's just remember, and we have this conversation every time I hear a player come in, like I was talking Commanders fans all offseason, Deebo Samuel's going to be a toxic member of that locker room. To say something like that one player coming into a room of 53 plus guys, because remember, it's not just 53 dudes in that locker room. There's about 70 dudes in that locker room. So to say that one dude is going to come into a group of 70 and him alone is just going to poison the entire room, that's giving a lot of discredit to the rest of the dudes in that locker room.
It sure is.
Saying that the NFL is going to say we're going to vote on this again is going to sway all the people who have this decision-making power is not giving those people a lot of credit. You know what I'm saying? And I think those people, historically, like we don't have a history in the NFL of seeing rule changes happen every year where it's like, well, I don't like the Patriots do that better than me, so I want to get rid of, you have to, Tom Brady's not allowed to stand in the pocket anymore. You have to be moving when you throw the football. Like, that's not how the NFL operates. So I get why an Eagles fan or even a Philly media person would get that way about it, but I promise you that is not the inspiration behind it. That being said, personally, the reason I don't like the tush push is because the NFL doesn't officiate the neutral zone accurately during the tush push play. That's the only reason I don't like the tush push.
That is correct, and that's a very valid point. I got 2 minutes for you to explain to me, though. You mentioned Deebo Samuel. You even mentioned Larry Tunsil. Washington made some moves. It wasn't Myles Garrett. It wasn't Zach Bond. It was two very established players. One of them is actually considered an Eagle killer in Deebo Samuel with the way that he dominated them on multiple occasions over his career. Have they done enough to close the gap? And I'll mention this. Somebody told me that the same team hadn't won the NFC East title in back-to-back years in a long, long time. So can we add that to the fact that Washington has made some big acquisitions and kept their first round pick this year.
It has been a long time. Listen, I think the Washington Commanders on paper, yes, they've closed the gap because remember, this is a Commanders team that held a fourth quarter lead in their first game against the Eagles. They won the second game against the Eagles. And I understand every Eagles fan that hears me say that is going to say, yeah, but if Devontae Smith catches that ball, look, I could go back to Thursday night and say, yeah, but if Dorrance Armstrong doesn't over pursue the Saquon Barkley touchdown, right? We could, yeah, but every game. Okay. But the bottom line is Washington Commanders won one of those games, had a fourth quarter lead in one of those games. The NFC Championship game was ugly. That was not Commanders brand football. So we're just going to chalk that up. That's just an ugly, stinking game. Now, that's not to take away from the Eagles. That's not for me to sit here and say that the Commanders can beat the Eagles 10 times out of 10. No, what it is to say is those are two very closely matched teams in the first place. Because even that NFC Championship game, go back and watch that game if you don't believe me. It's not until the fourth fumble that game is really over. Three fumbles, the Commanders are still fighting in that thing, are still having a chance to come back in that game and potentially get a win. So, as sad as it is to say that, to have that many giveaways and still be competitive in the game up to that point, that's actually somewhat impressive. Now, how it all comes together, right? That's what matters. How is it going to be on the field versus paper? On paper, I'll say yes. On the field, I don't know. Ask me again in October.
Yeah, a lot of people are sitting there saying, man, this kind of looks like the Texans, where they had that one good year and then they added all of these little pieces and it didn't happen. I don't think that's what the case in Washington. And then I'll tell people this about Philly. I think they're great. Don't get it twisted. I think they're a very, very good team. But Detroit's going to be healthy, right? Washington's going to get better. And then I go back to those Rams. The Rams needed to make one play, and the Rams have added a guy who can make one play. I believe the Diami fumble, the fumble with Austin Eckler, I don't think Deebo Samuel fumbles that ball, and I think the game kind of changes a little bit, and now these games are a lot closer. Man, make sure what y'all do is you won't find who the Commanders take at number 29. Locked On NFL Draft will give you the best idea of who might fall to them. Damian Parsons and my man, Coach Keith Sanchez, break that stuff down like never before, and they'll tell you who can add another impact player late in the draft. That seems like what good teams always manage to do. You're picking 29th. That is exactly what you are, a good team. It's also good for you guys to check out Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcast each and every day. Check out David on Locked On Commanders and me on Locked On Jaguars and Tyler Rowland on Locked On NFL every morning. Make sure you tap in. We appreciate you spending your time here with us on the Locked On Podcast Network. Take care.